Liberal has become a dirty word, but it did not start out a dirty word. The von Mises Institute describes a classical liberal as someone who believes in an unhampered free market economy, respect for private property rights, the rule of law, that is, government should be limited by its own rules, constitutional guarantees of freedom of religion, freedom of the press, international peace based on free trade. Up until 1900 or so, that is what a liberal was. We now have to use the label classical liberal to describe those people because liberalism has been hijacked by people that have made it into a dirty word. That's why I like to say leftists and distinguish them from liberals when I'm talking about leftist policies, or I would say socialist policies, sort of group policies, collectivist policies, which is different from classical liberalism. Classical liberalism had a big respect for individual rights. Leftism does not. Why? Because they put equality as sort of the ultimate goal of the state above individual liberty. And because of that, they sort of snuck into the classical liberal movement. They said, oh, we're liberals too because we're for equality under the law. Well, they had a different idea of what equality meant. They wanted equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity, not equal treatment under the law, as in you can't do something to someone that's of a disfavored group and not be punished by it. You punished for it. If you beat up a white Protestant and who's straight, you get prosecuted. If you beat up a homosexual who's of an ethnic minority and an atheist, you still get prosecuted for it because it's wrong to beat anybody up. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like them. It doesn't mean you have to be friends with them. It doesn't mean you have to do business with them because we respect private property and your limits. But you can't violate their true right, the right to the integrity of their body. And we as the state, we have to play it fair. We have to play it equal. We have to play it equal with who we prosecute. We can't selectively prosecute people of disfavored groups. If you're a Democrat and connected, you can commit big crimes. If you're a Republican, well, we've got so many laws that we'll catch you on some of them, and we'll do that. So, or that's just an example. Could go the other way too. Nixon wanted to do it the other way. But that's my point is classical liberalism isn't a dirty word. Conservatives, limited government, libertarianist conservatives like me, love those same things for different reasons. We might love them because they're a part of America's heritage that we want to preserve, or in some cases bring back, whereas the classical liberal just might love those things for themselves, apart from them being a part of our heritage. So it got ruined. Classical liberalism got ruined because they let in collectivists, socialists, who mouthed some of the same words but meant something different by them. And in the end, they ruined the word, they ruined the movement, and worse, they slowly, by degrees, changed the mindset of most people who define themselves as liberal. Now, the average person who says, yes, I'm very liberal, they don't mean any of the things that von Mises meant when they described a classical liberal. They sort of, by degrees, changed the meaning of the movement and the people in it. So, everything has been warped. And that ruined liberal. But what is going to ruin conservative? Okay? There is a philosophy that is supplanting classical conservatism too, which, again, loves the same things that classical liberalism loved, but for somewhat different reasons. And there are 6 things that characterize this new philosophy that has been, it's not a new philosophy, excuse me, it's newly calling itself conservative. And you'll see why by the time I'm done. It has these 6 characteristics. Number 1, it puts national greatness and state security above individual liberty. You see, while collectivism on the left put equality of outcome above individual liberty, this puts national greatness and security above individual liberty. So it's collectivist too, just for different goals. Number 2, it often has a belligerent and combative foreign policy, since it believes that the special destiny of the nation gives it a right or even a duty to impose its will by force. This is opposed to the classical liberal idea of we have free trade with nations, we have peace. Other than that, we kind of mind our own business. We can express things, but we don't use force to impose our will. These days, of course, classical liberalism has given that up. Now they want to impose our form of government around the world and make people value what we value at bayonet point, and not even what we value, because it's really DC imposing DC values on the rest of the world, when DC's values are out of favor even in the American heartland. They're even out of, our own people don't want these things in our own country, but yet we're using our military to bring them to other countries. So that's the foreign policy. Number 3, it takes a low view of the checks and balances in a republic in favor of a great man who should be given tremendous power. That this is this philosophy that is supplanting conservatism now. Number 4, there should be a loyal following, someone who's loyal to this person more than a set of ideas or principles like the Constitution. You know, it's like, well, wait a minute, the Constitution is getting in the way. This great man wants to do this great thing. We should let him. Ideally, he would even be able to switch positions with his opponent, and his followers would never notice the contradiction because they're so invested in the personality and not the ideas. Number 5, power should be centralized. And as a localist, I've opposed centralized power consistently for decades to the core of my being. But this philosophy says power should be centralized so that this great man can do great things. And number 6, it represents a merger between state power and corporate power. Now, that is what conservatism is becoming in America. Just like liberal change, the word liberal change and what it stood for changed. Now conservative is changing, and more people who are calling themselves conservative are advocating for things like the list I just named. But it isn't conservatism, is it? Because again, classical conservatism loves many of the same things that classical liberalism loved, just for different reasons, trying to preserve our heritage, attachment to our national identity. But there is a philosophy that those things fit. There is a philosophy. Are you ready? What is it called? Fascism. There are fascism. It fits fascism to a T. Now, for obvious historical reasons, those who hold this philosophy do not want to call it by its historical name, but their unwillingness to see what it is and call their philosophy by its historical name doesn't change the truth. They're fascists, and they don't know it, and they won't admit it. They call it conservatism, just like the socialists of yesteryear called what they believe liberalism. And in the end, all they did was corrupt liberalism and make it into a dirty word. The fascists are doing the same thing to conservative. So if you are a conservative, this failure to sort through these differences, it's going to drag down your philosophy of government further and further. Look what happened to liberals. They didn't just wake up one morning and decide to abandon traditional liberalism. Over decades, as these other people came in with these other ideas and supplanted them, they changed what it meant to be a liberal. The same thing is happening to conservative. It may be happening to you. You may have changed your ideas slowly into a more collectivist viewpoint than you believed decades ago, 5 years ago even. Things are changing fast. And what I'm saying is, I'm saying the same thing Proverbs says. Don't be deceived. Bad company corrupts good morals. Classical liberals had bad company in the socialists, and now liberal is a dirty word. The same thing has happened to conservatives. Conservatives are noted for what? For valuing history and tradition. My friends, we should learn from it and denounce the fascists that want to call themselves conservative. Thank you for listening.